Hi, my name is Liz Lowe, and I'm a procurement expert working for the province of British Columbia. And this video is to talk about the SRFP, or the short form Request for Proposal form, or the Appendix A. So this is the document that proponents would be filling out to create their proposals for any SRFP. You want to make sure that you've had a look at the video on the SRFP itself, whether you do it before this video or afterwards, because these two documents go hand in hand. They're very closely related, and it might make more sense to you if you've looked at both of them, some of the information that we're going to be covering over as we go through Appendix A. So going through Appendix A, then starting at the top where we've got the SRFP title as such, this is matching exactly what was in the SRFP that the Appendix A is connected to. So you'll see the title is going to be exactly the same in our sample, Superhero Event Planning. The SRFP number is the same, closing time is the same, and which ministry issued it when. All the same, exactly as what you saw in the SRFP. Then we move into this heading called Requirements. And this is telling you as a proponent that you need to complete this form and provide all the requested information, and specifically not to include any attachments or URLs or websites unless you've been specifically asked to do that in the SRFP. This is a really important factor. It is a mandatory requirement that you use Appendix A. We're not even going to look at your proposal if you've done it in any other format. And we're not going to be looking at attachments or URL websites that you reference unless we've specifically asked for that information. And again, if it seems to you that an attachment is appropriate or a website is appropriate and it was not asked for, perfect thing to be asking your government contact person so they can provide the clarity you need on whether or not you can or should be putting those attachments or URLs in your proposal. Now, some SRFPs are going to have a page limit, but not all of them will. In our sample, you'll see here that completed proposal forms should be no more than 20 pages in overall length, and no less than a 10-point font. And we put that in because we know, we could certainly do 20 pages and do a 4-point font. I'm not sure anyone could read it. We could put a lot of information in that. So we are giving you some guidance on how big the printing needs to be, just so that we're sure 20 pages means the same thing for everybody. Okay? And of course, if any URLs or appendices are requested, the page count would be exclusive of those URLs and appendices. Now, if you have a page limit on the SRFP that you're writing, and it turns out that your proposal exceeds the page numbers, you probably want to trim them back. You probably want to go in and do some editing so you can get within whatever that page limit is. And the reason is this next sentence, that the province will not evaluate any pages that exceed the maximum page count. So there's no point in giving us 21 pages if we've told you that we're looking for no more than 20, because we're not going to be reading that last page. So best thing to do, stay within the page limit if one exists. If there is no page limit in a particular Appendix A that you're looking at, that means that you can put your proposal together to whatever length makes sense for you. So let's move on then to some of the headings here, and we'll start with mandatory requirements. Now, if you've seen the video on the SRFP itself, you'll recall that the mandatory requirements, there are two types. There are the mandatory process requirements, and that's in the SRFP rules. And those are things like must be on time, must be in English, etc. You want to make sure you've read the SRFP rules because those mandatory process requirements are right at the beginning. Very, very important that you meet each and every one for us to be able to consider your proposal. Now, some SRFPs will have an additional mandatory requirement, and if you recall from the previous video, our sample does have one, and that was the experience working with at least one of the named superheroes. So if an additional mandatory requirement applies, you're going to see it both in the SRFP and you're going to see it in Appendix A. And there's a little bit more information in Appendix A, and that's how do you address the mandatory requirement. Now, in our sample, it says that it's addressed in Section 4. And we'll see that as we head down to Section 4. You'll see that we're going to actually be talking about experience there, and we're going to be reminding proponents about this mandatory requirement. However, not all mandatory requirements will be addressed in a pre-existing section on the SRFP. And an example of this might be a mandatory requirement for all proponents to have a valid certification of some type. In that case, rather than the SRFP Appendix A saying that the mandatory requirement is addressed in another section, it's going to be addressed right here. So the mandatory will be spelled out for you, and there will be instructions on how you meet it. If certification, as our example, was a mandatory requirement, then the SRFP Appendix A is going to be telling you how it is that you demonstrate you've met it. Now, maybe we want you to provide a photocopy of your certification. Maybe we want you to just state that you have it. Whatever it is that the SRFP Appendix A says, that's what you want to follow. There'll be space for you to put that in. So if it was a photocopy of your certification, for example, chances are you'll be asked to submit an appendix that was the certification that we've asked for. So follow the instructions here if there are any in Section 1, or note where it is that any additional mandatory requirements are going to be addressed. And let's just move on then to proposed subcontractors. Now, not all SRFPs are going to be allowing subcontractors, so you will see one of two things in this section. Either as you see it in the sample here, or it's going to say that proposed subcontractors are not permitted. Now, if proposed subcontractors are not permitted, that's just information for you to know, meaning that if you're going to respond to this, you need to be able to deliver all the services that are requested, just your organization. If proposed subcontractors are allowed, it simply is an option available to you. So in this case, if you are planning to use subcontractors, you would name them here. And it's a really good idea to do that, because when we talk about experience later, if you're using subcontractors, the experience of those subs can be used to count towards your overall experience as a proponent. If you don't name the subcontractors here, but you do talk about their experience in the later section, it then becomes confusing to the evaluators. Are these subcontractors or are they not subcontractors? So it really does add quite a bit of clarity to your proposal that you name any subcontractors that you might plan to use. If you're planning on not using any, you're going to be delivering the services all on your own, you can simply state that in the box, no subcontractors apply, or something to that extent. If you know you're going to be using subcontractors but you don't know who they are yet, that's fine. You can put that in the box if that's what you intend to do. And of course, if you are offered the contract, you will have to include the names of the subs in the contract itself. That's standard practice for government. So let's then move on to the executive summary, section 3 of our Appendix A. Now, in the executive summary, you'll see it's very straightforward. It just has instructions to provide an executive summary of the key points of the proposal. Entirely up to you as a proponent what you would like to put in here. We do recommend that you keep it to no more than 500 words, but there's no hard stop on filling this section out. If you happen to provide more, you do. That's okay. The intent here, though, is to give you the opportunity to highlight what you think is really important in your proposal. Now, keep in mind that this section is not directly evaluated, but if you happen to put information in here that we're looking for in our evaluation, we'll certainly count it. As if we find it anywhere in your proposal, it'll be considered towards awarding points to your proposal. But again, typically this is just highlights. It should be short, brief. The bulk of what you want to say is going to be in the subsequent sections coming up in Appendix A. So if we move down then into our next section, you'll see in here we have section 4 and it's called experience. And if you've seen the previous video on the SRFP, you'll remember in the table where it had the breakdown of points, one of the headings was experience. Again, as I pointed out in that video, the titles are exactly the same. So it's very, very clear to you what it is that is being evaluated, how many points have been identified for this particular section. Now keep in mind that experience is the heading we're using in our sample, but it could be anything in actual SRFP. Usually it's related to experience, but there's even the option that we're not evaluating experience. So for example, if we were directing this SRFP to qualified supplier list, we've already evaluated the experience of those qualified suppliers. That's why they're on our list through our request for qualifications process. So maybe we don't need to evaluate experience again. So we would have something else we'd be evaluating here. Typically, though, you're going to be seeing experience in some form or another being evaluated in an SRFP. So with that in mind, let's look at what it might look like in an SRFP. How might we format an experience section? So in our sample here, you'll see the proponent and or its proposed subcontractors, because remember in our sample we're allowing subs. We talk about experience delivering at least 2 projects of similar scope and complexity. This is very common language that you'll see in SRFPs that do evaluate experience. Now, in our sample, we're talking about number of projects. Some SRFPs will talk about years of experience. Either is okay. Just pay attention to how the language has been structured in the SRFP so you know, are you actually addressing years of experience or number of projects. Most SRFPs will also be time-bound. You'll see in our sample we're looking for 2 projects within the past 3 years. So that tells you that projects that are older than 3 years, we're not interested in evaluating. We're looking just for the experience that you have within a particular window of time. And you'll also note that the 3 years is as of the closing date of the SRFP, so we can be very clear on what 3 years means. Now, we're using words that are a bit subjective called similar scope and complexity. Again, a fairly common thing you're going to see in SRFPs. So what does that mean? We go on to define it. So similar scope and complexity includes, and then you've got this bulleted list, these 5 items that we're looking for in the experience of the projects that you're going to be citing for us. Now, it is very important that when you are describing your experience that you address everything that makes up similar scope and complexity. So if you address only some things and not others, that's going to adversely affect your scores. So be as diligent as you can be. Make sure that you've addressed absolutely everything here. Now, I said earlier that if there was that mandatory requirement about experience, and it was going to be addressed in Section 4. And now you see it. After our numbered list, you'll see the proponents must have experience working with at least one of the named superheroes. So we've got exactly the same mandatory requirement language that you've seen in the SRFP and that you saw earlier in Appendix A. So that's a reminder when you are putting your proposal together, when you're addressing this section, that you're absolutely certain that you've included the mandatory requirement information, that you've been clear that it's there. If you don't, if you are silent on this, it may be that there's nothing in your proposal that demonstrates you've met the mandatory requirement, and that means your proposal may be rejected. We might not even read it. So make very, very certain that you've addressed it, and it might even make you feel better to bold it or put it in highlight somewhere so that it's not missed in any way. You'll then see we talk a little bit about preferences. And again, not every SRFP is going to include preferences. Some will. And the preference is simply the thing that you can tell us about your experience that is going to give you a little extra points, going to put you above a minimal expected score. And in this case, we're looking for any experience that you may have had with the named superheroes to our SRFP. After that, you're going to see instructions. So in this case, we're asking for 2 to 4 examples of projects that the proponent or the proposed subs have completed that meets our definition of similar scope and complexity. Okay? Now, the numbers here are important. Remember, we are looking at projects. We said we should have at least 2, and now we're giving you instructions to give us 2 to 4 examples. So what that means then is that don't give us 5 examples, because we're not going to be evaluating the 5th one. We don't want to evaluate anything more than 4. As a matter of fact, if we just scroll down here a little bit, you'll see that there's this table together and this button that says Add Project. So in this case, you will add projects, but you'll see that the maximum number that's allowed is 4. So if you click on this button, Add Project, it simply means that you're going to get another table that you can fill out, but you can't give us more than 4. The smart form has been designed so that you're only able to give us up to 4. And now that is specific to this SRFP. Not all SRFPs will have a maximum number of projects. Some can let you do as many as you like. But those that do have a maximum number, it'll be clear what that is. So then for each project that you're going to talk about, you're going to be filling out this table. And the table's fairly straightforward. You give the project a name. If there were proposed subcontractors that were involved, who were they? And put that in. We want to have our start and end dates. So when did this project start? When did it end? This tells us how long the project was and also confirms that the project falls within the dates that we're looking for. Remember, in this case, we're looking for projects that were within 3 years as of the closing date of the SRFP. So we'll be confirming that with these start and end dates. And then we want a reference. And there's a little asterisk we'll get to in a moment as to what this means. So we're looking then for a company name, an individual's name, a phone number, an email address, where we can contact the reference. Now be clear, in a reference we are looking for the client reference, so someone from the client organization for this project who can verify the quality of the work that the proponent or the proposed subcontractor provided. That's a key piece. Please don't provide references that are your subs or yourself. That's not what we're looking for here. We really want the client reference. So moving down then, you'll see that we now have a bit of instruction about what we want you to tell us about the project. So what was the scope of that project? How it constitutes relevant experience. So going back to our list above, the one that said here's what similar scope and complexity means, you need to address each and every one of those, and that's what this bullet is all about. How does this meet the similar scope and complexity that we've defined for you? What was your role with this project, or your subcontractor's role, if that's applicable? And in this case, we do have some that are specific to our SRFP. What were the superheroes that were involved, if there were any, and how they were involved, and any special accommodations that might have been made for those superheroes. Again, very specific to our sample SRFP, but it does tell you that these bulleted lists can be customized for the specific SRFP that you're looking for. And the last couple of bullets tell us what the deliverables were that you did in this project, what measures were used to determine the quality of the work, and what the timelines were, and did you meet all of those timelines? Explain that. And finally, what was the end result of that project? So in this space below then on this table, you see this bit of white space, and this isn't very large, but it will expand, and it'll expand as much as you need it to. You would describe everything you need to address those bullets, making very, very certain you've covered everything that was in similar scope and complexity. Okay. And you'll see then the little asterisk here about the references, that they're able to verify the quality of the work. Now, keep in mind, it could be that you did a project a couple of years ago and the client's contract manager who was involved no longer works there, and so who is it that you should be giving as a reference? Keep in mind that your references need to be from your client organization who can verify the quality of your work. If it turns out that whoever was in charge of that contract at the time no longer works for the client organization, is there someone else's name that you could provide that is equally capable of being able to verify the quality of your work? And that would be all right as well. Okay, so you will fill out as many projects as you need to demonstrate that you have the experience that is being sought. And as I said, if it turns out this SRFP is not evaluating experience, what you will see in that section then is a different heading. There'll be information on what it is the ministry is looking for, instructions on what you are to provide, and space for you to provide it. You won't see the table there in that case. Most SRFPs, though, are going to be looking at experience and will be structured with the table, and you really want to be sure that you have addressed everything in that section. And let's move on then to approach. Again, Section 5 might be called something other than approach. Approach usually is referencing how would you deliver the services if you had the contract. So we're not talking experience or anything that you currently have, but this is how you are proposing to deliver the services. So again, for every SRFP, it's going to talk about what it is we want you to address. So in this case, you can see that we've got items A through E. These are things that we want you to address in your response. So completing all services within 20 weeks. That's something, so you're going to be needing to give us a timeline to tell us how you're going to be able to do that. And that is a key piece to all of this. It's not that you are going to do this, it's how are you going to do it. You'll see the language is propose and approach. That says explain how. And that might be what you see in an SRFP, might be the instructions that are provided. Explain how you would deliver the following. So an answer that says, yes, we will do all of this is not going to score very well. You need to explain the process that you're proposing. Now in our sample SRFP, we also have another number of bullets that talk about the unique needs of the invited superheroes. And again, every SRFP is going to be unique. In this particular case, we're actually looking for proponents to address all of these items A through K. Some SRFPs will be smaller than that. You scroll down a little bit, just before the box that the proponent would fill in, you'll see that it's got instructions. So propose an approach that addresses the requirements, so everything that we've said in Section 5. It then talks about how do you get those additional points? How do I do I get the edge on my competition in my particular approach? And that's this next sentence about any additional processes in your approach that may improve quality, increase efficiency, or otherwise benefit the province. So if there's something that you're planning to do that you think has unique benefits to the province, this is the place you want to tell us about it. You want to address everything that we've asked you to address in this section, and then be really, really clear. What are those benefits that you're proposing to provide? And why are they a benefit to the province? How are they increasing efficiency or improving quality? Another key piece to this, though, is that whatever these benefits are, they need to be included in your price that you're proposing. So we're not interested in additional value-add services that are available at an additional cost. This is you explaining what it is you're offering for that price that is going to be a benefit to the province in some way. So again, when you're completing sections 4 and 5, anything that's not very clear to you, any ambiguity, anything that just you're not sure, does it mean X or does it mean Y, perfect things to be asking your government contact person. Get that clarity that you need. So let's move on to section 6 then, which is price. Now I said earlier that not every SRFP is going to be asking for price. Some will ask you for a budget. If that's the case, what you will see here is the title will be budget, and the information contained in here will be different. It will explain to you what it is we're looking for in the budget and how it is we're going to be evaluating it. So what is it we're looking to see in that budget? So in this case, in our sample, though, we are doing the more conventional evaluation of price. This is what most SRFPs will likely do. Now, in our case, we're actually asking for 2 prices, and you can see that in the table. So if you go to the instructions at the top, it's talking about providing 1 price in each cell. So you'll see we have a table that's got 2 rows, so there's 2 cells to fill out. We're looking for 1 price in each one of those cells. Now, if the prices are unclear, if there's something about it that's just not making sense to you, now whether that's what price should include or how price is going to be evaluated, or is there a price that was missed that you think should be included, those are all great things to be asking the government contact person to send that question in writing. Now, if you put more than 1 price into a single cell, we're only going to be using the highest price in there for evaluation purposes. So that means then that it's going to potentially adversely affect your score. So if you look at our example, in the hourly rate, if you've got a range of hourly rates and you put that range in on the price, we're only going to take that highest number for our evaluation purposes. And it could be that other proponents that you are competing against have only put 1 price in there, which is a lot less than what you've put in, and that's going to affect scoring at the end of the day. So we are asking for just the 1 price, and you need to figure out how that would work best for you. Perhaps a blended rate would be an example of how you might want to approach that. Okay? The instructions then are going to go on about what is to be included in that price. And you'll see that the standard language is the province is not paying for any fees or expenses in addition to the prices proposed. So the prices you propose need to be inclusive of everything, unless there are exceptions put into the particular SRFP. Some will have no exceptions. It's simply, this is the price, that's what we're paying. Others will have exceptions. And you'll see in our sample that we have an exception for pre-approved travel as specified in the contract. And then we're saying it's going to be at the group 2 per diem rates. We give you the website that tells you what those are. So that tells you then that you're going to give us your prices, but for pre-approved travel, that's something you can charge in addition to, and you can look at the website to see how much each of the items are for any pre-approved travel that might happen. And you'll note that it says that the pre-approved travel expenses only apply to travel that's requested by the province. So that means as a contractor, you don't have the ability to say this travel is required. You can certainly point that out to your government contact, to the province as the contractor, saying you think this is needed, what do they think? But it would be up to them to request the actual travel to happen. Okay? Now, most SRFPs will either have no additional fees or expenses payable, or travel will really be the only thing that would be additional that you could charge. Some SRFPs, however, may have something else that is also billable separate from the pricing that's being requested. And remember, for our sample, we're talking event planning. So in this sample, we have something additional, and just that the ministry is going to reimburse the contractor at cost, meaning whatever it costs the contractor, that's what we're going to reimburse for the pre-approved expenses related to this SRFP. And you can look at Section 6 as to how that works. So very clearly then it's telling you what is separately billable. And if something is not clear, and I'll note on our sample as a perfect example of this, that the sentence stops in the middle of the sentence. So we'll reimburse the contractor at cost for all pre-approved expenses related to, and that's all you see. So if I was reading this as a vendor, that would be confusing to me, and I would definitely want to be asking the government contact to complete that sentence so I knew exactly what that was referencing. Okay. So then you can go to the table and you'll be filling the table out. So in this case, in our sample, we're looking for that firm price for delivering the services for our one event, and then we want an hourly rate that would apply for the second event if we ask one. So you'd be giving us those two prices. And if you remember from the first video on the SRFP, we said that we would be evaluating each price separately using the formula that was in the SRFP. So you know exactly how it is we're going to be evaluating price, noting in that case, lowest price gets all the points and everyone else is prorated on how close they got to that lowest price. So that actually ends the portions of the SRFP that you as a proponent would fill out about how you're going to deliver services and how experienced you are and for how much. But Section 7, this is one last section that needs to be completed, and it's absolutely critical to the SRFP process. As a matter of fact, if we don't have this filled out, that constitutes the missing a mandatory requirement. You need to fill this confirmation of your intent to be bound. Very important. And what you'll see here is there's very specific language as to what you are agreeing to. So when you submit your proposal to the SRFP, you're agreeing to all the terms and conditions of the SRFP, including the SRFP rules. And there's a link that can take you to the website where those SRFP rules are. So again, you don't have the option of changing the SRFP rules. They are what they are, but you want to make sure you understand them. And any questions around what do they mean, you want to be able to ask those while the SRFP is open, because when you submit your proposal, you're agreeing to them in their entirety, whether or not you've read them. You're also agreeing that if there were any investigations that you needed to do, that you did all of those investigations, you did the research you needed to make sure that you could prepare a sound proposal. And finally, you are bound to what you said in your proposal. That's critically important as well. So the province is bound to the process that it's laid out in the SRFP, and you as a proponent who has submitted a compliant proposal, you are bound to what you have said in your proposal. So it's a bit of a mutual agreement on both parties. Okay? So if you are doing an e-bid through BC Bid, you want to fill out all of these boxes except the signature field, because by submitting through the BC Bid e-bidding function, you have an e-bidding key, and that's deemed to be equivalent to a signature. So you don't have to sign it if you're doing an e-bidding. If you are submitting in hard copy, you must include a signature. Don't miss that. That's a critically important piece of this process. So if you go through this section, first thing we're going to ask you for is, who are you? What's your organization name? Now, if you are submitting a proposal as an individual, you're not a company, you're just a person who is submitting a proposal, you would put your own name here. If you are a company, though, that's the name we want here. That's who the proponent organization is. If you are submitting a joint proposal, meaning that you've got an organization plus proposed subs, it would be the proponent's name that goes here, not the subs' names. We just need the one organization name. Okay. Now, if you have a business number, put it in the next box. If you leave this box blank, that's okay. It doesn't have to be filled out, but if you have a business number, it certainly helps us if you could just stick it in this box, just print it off in this box. If you're not sure what the business number means, there's a link to the website that can provide you more information on what that is. Then you've got the box for your signature. Again, if you're doing this in hard copy, you want to make sure this is signed. If you're doing it through e-bidding, you don't need to worry about this box because your e-bidding key takes care of it. We then want you to print the name of whoever it is that signed this particular SRFP proposal. Okay. And how do you get a hold of them? So what's the email address for the individual that we would be getting a hold of to connect about the proposal? We always do need to get a hold of proponents, even if it's nothing more than to give them the information on who is successful in the SRFP. So you want to make sure you give us an email address of appropriate contact for your proposal. We'll want to know your address, so your organization address or your individual address if you're not an organization, if you're not a company, and then the date that you filled all of this out. And that's it for the Appendix A. That's the entire document. So if you have any other questions, I'm not too sure how it is you should be filling out the appendix or how this works, keep in mind that besides the videos that we have made available for you, we also have a proponent's guide. So you want to have a look at that guide. It's not very long, about 8 pages, and it provides a lot of information that you're going to find useful when completing your Appendix A. And of course, as I say throughout the videos, the #1 source for information on a specific SRFP is the government contact person. Don't be shy about asking questions. Get the clarity you need on the SRFP so that you can write the best proposal possible.